My name is Matt Fiedler. I'm a city of Lima, Ohio. I am actually IT background, but I handle OT for water, wastewater. So about 18 years of IT and about 7 years of OT. So basically, this is the project for our headworks to upgrade. This is a picture of our plant. The big project of it was the big 4 tanks and everything forward. The rest of it was all controls. So it was a fun project. So a little about Lima. It was named after Lima, Peru. So we service about 40,000 customers throughout the city and remote sites. All our water comes from above ground reservoirs, and our first plant was built in 1930. So since then, we've just done a bunch of increases and made it better. So the biggest thing is we needed to increase, per the EPA, to increase to 70 MGD. And the only way we're going to do that is with controls upgrade. So we knew we had to digitize this 30-year-old technology and modernize it to make it more efficient. So the big gist of it is they came to us and said, you can't discharge into the river more than 5 times a year. So we had to come up with a plan to make that happen. So the only way we could do it, increase the flow into the plant, and then add the controls, and then a few other projects that are ongoing for a basin and for storage. Basically, and then the 70 MGD was part of a wet weather maximization plan, so we can treat as much as we can and get it out without having to discharge into the river. So those were the main points why we had to start. So we were able to piggyback a process control upgrade, which started before I came on board. But then once I got there, I kind of helped guide during project meetings of where we were going to go with our digitization of everything. So the big thing was we had really no idea. The guy left. We didn't know where to go from there. So we wanted to make it an industry standard. We wanted to be reliable. So then we had a retention of all the records for future. So then we also wanted the operators to be more fluid in how they perform their work and made it more easy for them to accomplish their work and save them time by not having to run around. And then upgrade all our remote lift stations using private telemetry that we have, allow remote troubleshooting so that it can be fixed quicker, and then replacing all the failing PLCs at the plant. So some of our network goals, we had fiber ran throughout the plant. It's 20 plus years old. All we did was fight issues with it breaking. So we decided to replace our fiber. We looked at fault tolerant servers, so we went with Stratus for that, for the uptime, and then virtualize everything onto that Stratus box. So then we added static switches at all the panel levels to allow us more security and allow us to separate traffic. And then add backup recovery, which we didn't have before. So now we can have off-site backups and basically have about 20 seconds we would lose if we happen to lose a server. But we haven't had that yet, so it's been great. And then add cybersecurity and plant security, try to make it a little bit more secure for the plant operators and for our assets. And as staff, we definitely need a better understanding of how the plant DCS ran. So working hand in hand allowed us to get that knowledge and retain it at least for the next 25 years. And then create a process control standard. A lot of times you get stuck getting whatever low bid was. Well, we came in and we said, no, we need to set to something, and that's what we settled on so that the engineers could write the scopes of work off of what we were looking for. And then also all parts and everything, we didn't want to have a bunch of parts lying on the shelves. We all have those rooms with tons of stuff that'll never get used. So we tried to mold all the processors and pieces and parts, even if they cost a little bit more, so we could only use I think we only have 3 processors in the entire city out of 40-some PLC panels. So plus it allows for for water and wastewater when we get water done. So really, planning ahead is what our biggest asset was. We planned probably about 3 years before we even dug dirt. So we used a CMAR process, which allowed us to get online on board early, spend a year of planning to figure out our downtime, our process, and all our parts to make sure we had everything that would work ahead of time. Then we used our local distributor and all our Rockwell resources to help review that documentation so we weren't missing something. And then we also tried to future-proof so that if we had a project coming up like our water side, we tried to implement items so that they would be able to be implemented with the new plant PX system we used. And then I attended a lot of trainings and events to learn the software and the pieces. And then we also looked ahead. We were forecasting projects that were years out to make sure that if we were going to replace something, we replaced it with something that would be compatible. And then all the parts are trying to make those all the same. And the biggest thing was trying to make sure our engineers that wrote the scopes of work understand the way we went. We went Rockwell automation with Plant PX, the whole suite. So we wanted to make sure they used the faceplates and all the AOIs and as much as everything as possible to keep that same like look. And then since we got that all done, now when we do the water side, I learned a lot to make that easier transition. So when we planned ahead, we have a complete radio network that was old serial. We knew that wasn't going to cut it, and we had to keep the old running while the new was being put in place. So we had license before. We decided to go unlicensed spread spectrum and run it at 1 megabit. So we had two networks running for that. So as we brought new panels online at the remote sites, we were able to switch cable because they were already running serial and IP on the MDS radios. So we were able to get all that implemented and not have to wait to follow behind. So allowed it to be much quicker and seamless doing it that route. And in the process, we already had another server running for the new process control network. We went to Stratus, the medium, so I think it was a 4710. And even with 8 VMs on that, we're barely pushing 20% of usage on it. So we have plenty of room to move. So we had 2 control networks running, 2 radio networks running. So as we took stuff offline and brought it online, it was very seamless. And so we had 2 operator stations working too. So there was a little practice in there for them to figure out what was where, but it went pretty smooth. And ask the plant staff how you want it to run, not how it used to run. That's the biggest thing. We made a lot of changes, which cost us time and extra money to change. So we took that approach with the new project where we went, how do you want it to work? And then implement that. And then we allowed remote access to our integrator who worked out of Florida and Michigan and still be secure. So it allowed us to even get changes 15 minutes instead of 3 days to get them back on site. So being IT, we were able to facilitate them to be able to get in whenever they needed to. We used Allen Bradley conversion kits that reduced our downtime at some of the critical points where we can't just rip out a panel and put a brand new one in. And increasing our remote sites allowed the remote administration. I can go online, I can troubleshoot from home. I'm on call 24/7, so anything easy for me. And then anything I could utilize IP communication I put in. That way, even for me, I do a lot of maintenance and monitoring off of that. The plant may never use it, but I use it on my side. So, as you can see here, leading up to the project, we were having quite a bit of overtime hours and call-outs. After the project was complete, we pretty much dropped by a third, which is about a $20,000 a year cost savings. Now, it's never going to pay for the whole project, but allows us to utilize that money elsewhere. So I didn't realize it was that extreme until after I did my first presentation. I added that and went, wow, I didn't realize we were saving that much. So basically when we approached this, there was a lot of questions we started asking. And a lot of stuff we did, nobody's ever done, so it was kind of a learning curve for us. So basically, we were like, is it secure or can it be secured? And also, does it fit the operation and control standard you set? A lot of times, some things don't, and sometimes you got to push back and say, no, this is how I need it. If not, it costs you more money because screen changes and them creating those screens to bring in via Plant PX actually cost you more money. And will it be supported for years to come? Make sure you get patches and the support you need. Is it scalable? We definitely want something we could just grow with and not have to fight any issues. Can it be securely remote accessed? That's a big thing. If you can't secure it, you might as well not put any remote access because somebody else can just even physically come up and plug in. Luckily, with the Rockwell piece, it has a very nice administration that integrates with Active Directory, and you have to have the user in there, you have to have the computer in there. So even if physically, if they get in, they might be able to see a read-only node, which they can't make any changes, luckily. And then we'll run locally on a server and no outside connection. I've had to go through this with wireless mesh networks for Thin Manager, and everything I have in the control network is control only. If an administration needs it, they have a view-only client if they need to see it. So we try to keep everything inside the network. And then make sure the staff understand why you're increasing security. We had a lot of stuff, well, we had a single user login. Well, now you have individual users. So explaining to them why we have to increase security is a big must. And now we're starting to limit USB devices or city-issued USB devices. And then setting up manageable user accounts, groups, and computers are definitely a bonus because if you get a call in the middle of the night, you need to shut something down, you have the ability to do that. And then if we lose outside network to the plant still runs. Everything's inside the bowl we have there, so they can still continue to operate even if they lose network connection, even the remote sites. And then definitely implement training for the staff to watch out for any risk. We do know before, and we send phishing alerts so that they watch that for their email. So here's some lessons and takeaway. So just look ahead, plan for your future projects. Planning will definitely save you money in the long run. And the biggest thing is the digital transformation will save you money in the long run. And it really has led to one of the best decisions we did at the city. So we're looking forward to our water side and having everything run efficiently.